All right, everybody. Welcome to another live stream. This is a live stream kind of looking back in time that I wish I started a while ago, to be honest with you. It's definitely one of the most important topics that you could ever train on. It's one of the most important decisions that you can ever make. And it's a decision that truthfully is going to be, even after I give as much information as I can today, still for a lot of you isn't going to be super easy. And that's a real estate investing strategy that fits your personality. And you all know, obviously, my claim to fame is teaching real estate agents how to invest in real estate. And for the most part, whether you're a new or experienced investor, the word investing in real estate, it invokes some sort of thought. And it's interesting because for every person out there, there's a different thought. For some people, investing means owning small multifamilies. For some people, investing means fixing and flipping. For some people, investing means assigning contracts. For some people, investing means using your money to put into a deal. For other people, it means buying a vacation rental, doing a short-term rental, owning it and using it at the same time. And so invariably, most agents that I talk to, when I say, hey, do you want to invest in real estate? Almost all across the board, almost every single agent raises their hand and says yes. And this is not just an agent thing. Most people in the world, including your clients, if you say, hey, do you want to invest in real estate? They're going to say yes. And one of the biggest reasons why anybody, agents or just your clients or anybody else, why people are going to say yes is because they see the results that people get from investing. And most of us know this. I use this analogy all the time. If I'm doing a live training, I always say to people, hey, how many people do you know? How many people that are in the crowd know somebody who got rich through owning some sort of real estate or investing in real estate? And invariably, almost every single person raises their hand in the crowd. And I always ask a follow-up question. I say, how many of those people that you know that got rich through owning real estate were geniuses, or were these over the top, like 1 out of 1 million people? And almost nobody raises their hand. And then I follow it up with a third question. I say, how many of them were average Joes? Just people who invested in real estate and over a series of 5 or 10 or 15 or 20 years are now multimillionaires. And almost everybody raises their hand. So most of us know, we know that investing in real estate is the right thing to do, but we don't necessarily think too much about the different strategies that we can implement. And by the way, there are a lot of strategies that we can implement, which is why I want to make sure that we cover this today. So anytime that I work with somebody who's in the inner circle, we're always going to follow the same 5-step process. And I'm going to cover that really quickly because I want everybody to understand, even if you're not in the inner circle, what you should be thinking about. The first thing that you need to understand, which is step one, is where are you currently? And where you're currently at is like, how much capital do you have, if any? If you're like me, I had none to start. What type of investing have you done in the past? If you were like me when I started, the answer was nothing. What type of contacts do you have? Whether it's people that you could borrow money from, whether it's contractors, whether it's attorneys. So what are you starting with? What's your base? And it doesn't really matter. Like, it matters what your base is because it will help formulate your plan. But no matter what your base is, if you're like me and your base was basically nothing when you started, except for an extreme amount of energy and desire to succeed, you need to know your base. The second thing you need is, what's your outcome? And this is going to lead into the investing strategy that you use. It's very important that you think in your head, where do I want to be 10 years from now? And most of us think And I thought this when I first started coaching is most people think that everybody has the same goals. Of course, everybody wants the same outcome. And that really couldn't be further from the truth. And I've told this story a couple times and I'm going to repeat it because it's so important. I had somebody who came to work for me. She was an inside sales agent who was making phone calls for seller leads that I had. She did really well, so I promoted her to an acquisition rep going on face-to-face seller appointments. She started doing really, really well. So I started giving her more leads. She kept getting more deals and she was making six figures, but she wasn't making millions of dollars. And all of a sudden, she did that for about 5 or 6 years for me, maybe 7 years. All of a sudden, she tells me that she's retiring, and she's probably in her mid 50s. It's like, you're retiring? What? How? And she said, well, during the time that I work for you, I bought a couple of multifamilies, and the multifamilies, the rent that I collected paid for all my expenses. So everything that I made while working with you, I saved. And I am going to buy a bus and I'm going to travel the country. I'm going to live on the bus. And I live very, very cheaply. And now that my rents have gone up, I'm actually cash flowing. So I'm actually financially free. And I'm like thinking in my head, and that's kind of where it hit me. Would I personally want to live off of $20,000 or $30,000 a year? Not live in a house, live in a bus, and have a little bit of rental income coming in and just travel the country? And my answer to that question is absolutely not. Does that mean, though? Does that mean that that shouldn't be somebody else's goal? And it was her goal, and she achieved it. So she would probably look at what I do, which is buy a lot of nice things, spend a lot of money, have high expenses, and she would probably look and say, "Wow, what a waste of resources. Why do you need all that money?" So my point is that what your goals are is going to have a large impact on what your investing strategy is. Okay? So you've got to really think, and this is probably one of the hardest things that you can do in your investing business, in your life, in your real estate business. You've got to figure out where you want to be 10 years from now. And for me, I am exactly where I want to be. I've got a bunch of nice things. My wife doesn't have to work. I make a lot of money. I train. I have fun. I work a lot, but I really enjoy what I do. That's what I wanted. So my path to achieve that is going to be different than somebody who wants to retire, not work at all, live in a bus, not live in a house, and travel the country. Totally polar opposite goals. And so you've got to figure out what are your goals, because the investment vehicles that you use are going to be different. Oh, I forgot to mention one other point about her, actually. That's a huge part of it, is that the money that she saved during the time that she worked with me, she now invests in our apartment deals. Okay? So she makes thousands of dollars a month just by investing in our apartment deals. Then she makes a little bit more from the couple multifamilies that she owns. So she got financially independent. She doesn't want to own a big business, doesn't want to work anymore. And again, that's very different than what I want. And so you got to figure out what you want. And the investment vehicle is going to help determine like how you get there. So we're going to talk about a bunch of different investment vehicles today. Now, I can't cover every investment vehicle because I don't have experience in an investing vehicle. So I'm not going to sit here. One thing I'll never do is I'll never read out of a textbook and say, oh, owning storage units gives you these benefits and these negatives. Like if I haven't done it, I'm not going to speak on it ever. I'm only going to speak to the stuff that I've done. Now, luckily, I've done a lot of different things. And luckily, what I've done are kind of some of the most common things when it comes to investing. Okay. So the first thing that I want to talk about is really active versus passive income in real estate. Okay. And quick turn versus long term. Okay. So these two concepts are very, very important. Passive versus active. When you say that you want to become an investor, does that mean that you want to actively spend time flipping houses, assigning deals, building a rental property portfolio? Or do you want to spend money? Okay. Do you want to spend your time investing or do you want to spend money? So if you're like me and you started out with very, very little capital, I didn't have capital that I could invest. I couldn't be passive out of the gate. But just to give you an example of what it's like to be completely passive, and an example of some people that it may make sense to be passive. Okay. So if somebody had $500,000 in their bank account and they had two options. They could either be passive or they could be active. Somebody with $500,000 in their bank account, if they invest with somebody like us or somebody else that syndicates deals that provides passive investment opportunities to individuals, somebody with a $500,000 capital base could make somewhere around six figures per year. So for some people, going back to what's your 10-year goal, there are some people that may want to earn six figures a year completely passively, and they have capital. Now, a lot of us that are on this call do not fit into that category. So I just want to be clear that I'm only talking to the people that have got capital sitting on the sideline, that don't necessarily have a home for it. They know they want to invest in real estate, but they don't want to actively go out there and hunt deals. They don't want to actively go out there and manage tenants. They don't want to actively build construction crews. If you've got capital, it is as simple as finding a good operating partner like us or like somebody else who operates investment real estate and putting money into their deals. And again, if somebody has $600,000, they can earn six figures by being completely passive. So there's a certain percentage of people that are on this call and that will rewatch this, that if you have capital, it can be as simple as that for you. Because at the end of the day, rather than you learning all of the skills necessary to do what we do, all you have to learn is how to be a good operating partner that can produce returns that you want. Okay. So I know that that's not going to apply to everybody who's on this call. If there is somebody who's on this call that wants to learn about the passive capital opportunities that we provide, please just type into the comment section or reach out to me directly and we can have that discussion. Now, I know there are a lot of people out there that have limited capital or they want to learn how to leverage their own capital. Okay. So now we're going to get into yet another classification of investing. What is investing? Well, it's very broad. So I break investing down into two types of investing. Number one, quick turn investing, assignments, wholesales, flipping. Quick turn meaning you're in a deal for a year or less, or longer term investing, which is typically, 1, 2, 3, 10, 20, and hopefully basically forever investing. Okay. So one thing to consider, if you're on this call and you're an agent and you're thinking about investing in real estate, or you're already investing in real estate, is do you want to do quick turn, long term, or both? So I'm going to talk about quick term just very, very quickly. So my team this year will do between 130 to 150 fix and flips. We are a very active quick turn company. Quick turning is a way to get active income. If you are a very, very successful, high income earning agent, quick turning may not make sense for you. If you already have a ton of active income and you're thinking, hey, I just want to be a little bit more passive, I want to own assets, etc., quick turn might not be for you. But again, I know that most of the people that are listening their income from their real estate sales is probably not north of 300, 400, $500,000. And especially if your income from real estate sales is around six figures or under six figures, I would almost always advocate some sort of quick turn investing. Now, does that mean that you have to go out and change what you're doing every day? No, absolutely not. And one of the biggest principles of the agent investor platform is that agents to do quick turn deals and even long term deals, just to invest, period, agents come across and have opportunities in front of them all the time that they don't necessarily need to go out and spend a whole bunch of time trying to figure out how to be an investor. It's more about having your eyes open. So I'm going to give you a couple examples of some quick turn examples of deals that I think every agent should implement. Every agent, I think, unless you're making, again, north of 350, north of $400,000, actively selling real estate. If you're making six figures or under, I believe you should do some sort of quick turn investing. Okay, and I'm gonna tell you why. I'll give you the two simple examples. The first deal I ever did, 13 Cameron Ave. I went on an appointment. I went to the house to list the house. I had no interest in listing. She wanted to sell direct to an investor. Okay, like had no interest. House was a wreck. She didn't want her neighbors to know what the house was going to look like. And long story short, I put her property under contract, assigned it to somebody who turned her two family into two luxury condos, and I made six figures assigning that contract. Now, I'm not telling you this to brag. I'm telling you this because as agents, even if you're not trying to uncover these types of deals, you will come across sellers who want to sell to investors. And this is one misconception that a lot of agents have. Some agents will say, well, she would have made more money listing her house. Yeah, she would have. I tried to get her to list the house. She didn't want to. She wouldn't have listed the house. She wanted someone to buy the property sight unseen. So I assigned the deal. This was an opportunity. And again, I know if you're an agent on the call, you go on enough listing appointments, you're going to come across somebody who wants to sell their house and is willing to take a discount to sell it in an easy fashion. Okay. And I use the mechanism of signing a deal. Okay? Another deal, an agent that's in the inner circle brought to me. It was a house that their friends, they inherited because their friend's mom passed away. It's in a nice community in Massachusetts. Because they were in the inner circle, they had the ability to partner with us. We partnered on the deal. We put up the money. We did the construction. And we split a deal, and we made six figures each. Six figures each on a fix and flip deal that they traditionally would have only made 4, 5, 6% commission. Again, the seller did not want to list the home. The seller wanted to sell direct to an investor. And frankly, we got a little bit lucky on the ARV. This was during the absolute boom of the market where people were paying $80,000 over asking. Those days are gone now, unfortunately. But those are two examples. And why I'm mentioning this is because I believe that unless you're making a ton of money as a real estate agent, you should have your eyes open for quick turn deals. At least. You don't necessarily, you may make the commitment to prospect for off-market deals, to fix and flip, or to assign. That may be part of your agenda, right? That may be something that you want to do. But to me, at a minimum, you just want to have your eyes open. You know, what are people in your office having coming soon? Is it a flip opportunity? Is it an assignment deal? What seller appointments have you been on? You know, are you telling your SOI that not only do you list nice houses, but you also buy houses that need a bunch of work? So I believe that every agent should have some sort of quick turn. And if you're going to do quick turn, then you could do it completely passively in the way I just talked about, which is partner with us or assign a deal. Or you could be much more active and you could be out there hunting for deals all the time. So this is where we start to get into the strategies. Now, if your main objective, going back to that 10-year goal, if your main objective is you're saying, okay, I need to make as much money every year as I possibly can. I need to get my active income up as high as I can. Fixing and flipping is a great way to do it. Fixing and flipping is a much higher dollar per hour than being an agent. It just is. I'm not knocking being an agent. I'm an agent. I'm a broker. I have 350 agents. But flipping houses is a much higher dollar per hour than working with the buyer, than listing a home. It's a very, very high dollar per hour. However, if you decide that you want to be more active in it, more than just like keeping your eyes open, doing like one quick turn deal a year, if you want to do 3, 4, 5, 6, 10, maybe you want to get crazy like us and do over 100 per year, then you've got to be an active marketer to sellers off market. And we teach and train on how to find great off market deals all the time. But again, when we're talking about choosing an investing strategy that fits your personality, are you somebody who wants to run a seller sales organization? My team goes on about 125 seller appointments per week to buy like 3 or 4 houses a week. Most of the time when we're going out on these seller appointments, we're meeting with the seller, and selling direct to an investor doesn't fit their objectives. That's okay. It's totally okay for them to not want to sell directly to us. We've got other alternatives. We can list their home. Sometimes they keep their home and they're just looking to see what they could get. But if you decide my investing personality, what I want is to earn a bunch more income per year, and I want to get really active, and I want to do a lot of flips, you've got to generate a ton of face-to-face seller appointments. And then you have to get into, okay, well, what are the strategies necessary in order to do that? And again, we talk about these in much more detail on other shows. But that means you're going to mail, or you're going to call, or you're going to text, or you're going to door knock, or you're going to run ads on Facebook, or you're going to do pay-per-click, and you're going to generate all these seller appointments every single week. And you're going to be a seller appointment generation machine and go on as many of these face-to-face appointments as you can. And you're going to close on them, and you're going to flip them. And if you're flipping them, you're going to make $40,000 to $80,000 a flip, times as many flips as you're going to do. And in terms of, again, it fitting your personality, you've got to do really 2 things really well if you're going to flip a lot of houses. The first is generate a bunch of seller appointments. You've got to get deals off market to make money in the flipping business. So you've got to do all those strategies I said. So you've got to do a bunch of marketing to get the appointments. Then you've got to get face-to-face with people and sell them on selling to you. And then you've got to renovate them. So you need to be really good at sales, marketing, and construction. Now, if that sounds like you, if that sounds like what your day-to-day, you want your day-to-day to be, and if fits in with your 10-year goal, again, keep in mind, does this fit in with your 10-year goal? A mistake that we made, and I'm not one to sit here, I'll talk about all my successes. I talk about all my successes all the time. One of my biggest failures and mistakes was that instead of focusing a little bit more on long-term, we focused more on active income, and we did a ton of flips every year. Now, we built up a machine to do a bunch of flips, and at this point, the machine is built. The staff is there, the marketing is there, the sales is there, the construction teams are there. So we're not going to shut it off. But if I were to be honest with myself, and again, this is what you guys need to do. You need to be honest about what your goals are. My objective when I got into real estate, when I read the book Rich Dad Poor Dad, was not to flip a bunch of houses. It really wasn't. I never said in 2003, 2004, 2005, geez, want to flip a bunch of houses. Never did. I said I want to own a bunch of long-term passive income assets. So if you don't want to flip a bunch of houses, don't start flipping a bunch of houses. Sounds easy, right? But again, the issue that you run into with almost every one of these strategies is if you do it right, you'll have success. You'll have financial success. Once you start to have some financial success, it can become easy to lose sight of your goals, which is why that 10-year, vision that you have for yourself and your company is so important. So we got a bunch of people live right now. I'm just going to check the chat. I'm going to pause for a second. Is this all making sense? If this is making sense to you, please type into the chat box if this is making sense. I want to take like a 2-second break. I just want to make sure that this is making sense. Please type making sense into the chat box just so I can see that I'm on the right track so far. Because I'm about done talking about flipping, and I want to transition into some more passive income strategies. But again, I want to just make sure that this is all making sense. So type in making sense into the chat box just so I can see again that you guys that you guys know that this is all making sense.
Hey everyone, this is Tom Caffarella. I want to quickly interrupt the podcast to number one, thank all of my loyal listeners of the Agent Investor podcast and tell you guys really quickly about an exciting event we have coming up. It's a 2-day event. It's called the Passive Income Real Estate Investor Event that you can find out more details at passiveincomeevent.com. We're going to be doing a 2-day training session teaching all of the agents and all of the investors at the event on how to achieve financial freedom through real estate. If you're like me and your goal is to not work 80, 100 hours a week grinding, selling real estate, flipping homes, definitely check out this event. We're going to teach you how to build a passive income portfolio so that you can retire, so that you can work when you want, how you want, and ultimately achieve financial freedom. So again, go to passiveincomeevent.com for more details, and we look forward to seeing you at the upcoming event.
All right, cool. Making sense. Oh, somebody said that the video was glitching a little bit. I apologize for that. Frankly, I have no idea what the issue was, but I do apologize, and hopefully it wasn't something that was an issue for a long time. So we talked about fixing and flipping and the strategies that you need and getting deals off market and why that's important and what you need to do there. The next thing I want to talk about is longer term asset holding. So if you're talking about longer term asset holding, again, guys, I'm only going to talk about my experiences. So I'm not going to talk about stuff that, I don't have a lot of experience in. I'm not going to talk about owning a mobile home park, or I'm not going to talk about owning a storage unit or anything like that because I just haven't done it. So I am going to talk about the most tried and true investments, which are small multifamily, short-term rentals. I'm going to talk about apartment buildings, which is really our primary focus at this point. And so I'm going to talk about the pros, the cons, what you need to do to be successful. And again, like I talked with flipping, I do want to make another point on flipping. I talked about flipping and I said, you need to get really good at a few things with flipping because it's not just about what you want your 10-year goal to be, but it's about what skills you need in order to be successful in that area of investing. And again, I talked about specifically with flipping that you need to get really good at marketing, need to get good at sales. And when I say sales, like going on an appointment cold with somebody you've never met before and getting them to sign a contract to sell their house to you. And you need to get good at construction. So if you're talking about these 3 skill sets that you need to get good at over the course of time, I guess unless you're partnering with us in the inner circle, you could take away the construction piece. But for those of you who are not in the inner circle, you have to add the construction piece. So those are the skills, right? So let's talk about the other areas of investing. Let's talk about small multifamily, pros, cons, all this good stuff. So small multifamily, I'm kind of going to define, keep it even 1 unit, condos, townhouses, single families, all the way up to say 10 units. I'm going to define that as small multifamily. When most people think about investing in real estate, if I were to poll, everybody that's on the line right now, and I said, what is investing in real estate? Most people would probably answer saying, owning a 3-family in a specific town and collecting rents. So we built up an over 300-person rental property portfolio. And I want to talk about some of the really good things, some of the really bad things about small multifamily portfolio. But I also want to, again, talk about the skills that are needed in order to do this business. So when you're talking about small multifamily accumulation, again, it gets back to your goals. If you have smaller-ish multifamily goals, if you say something like, I want to earn 6 figures passively in small multifamily real estate over the course of a 10-year period, we can afford to take it pretty slow. We can afford to do something and utilize something called the BRRRR strategy. Now, I've talked about the BRRRR strategy before, but it's a really, really important strategy that I need to talk about really quickly because it's relevant to which strategy you're going to choose. The BRRRR strategy, BRRRR is simply an acronym. And BRRRR is buy, hopefully at a discount, renovate, rent at fair market value, refinance, repeat. Most people, the biggest majority of people who got rich owning multifamily real estate, passive income real estate, became wealthy through this mechanism. They bought a family, they put some money into it, they rented it, they waited a couple of years, they pulled their money back out, and they bought another one. And they just kept going. So just so you guys have some markers and some understanding about how to get to 6 figures with small multifamily, all that you need, you're going to cash flow if you're buying right. If you're cash flowing out of the gate, you're buying right. On average, right now, you should be cash flowing about $500 per door. Okay. So that means if you want to get to 6 figures, or call it, a lot of people say I want $10,000 a month, you need 20 doors. Which means you need maybe 6 families or 7 families, something like that. Okay. Just roughly. And if you're talking about going slow and doing it over a 10-year period, it's just a matter of saving up for those first couple of down payments, doing a little bit of work with the property, renovating it, getting it fully rented it out, letting the rents rise, and then refinancing later and continuing on and on and on. So what are the skills if you're going to go slow like that with small multifamily? Well, one skill or one thing they need is a little bit of money. You don't need a ton of capital in order to do that. You don't need a ton because you're using the BRRRR strategy, and even a lot of people use an FHA loan to get their first, 3-family or 4-family, or what you want to call the number of units. And you're going to keep going slow. You're going to keep buying, again, renovating, renting, refinancing, and the skills that you do need that little bit of capital. Okay, you need to raise a little bit, or you might work hard at your job or your business where you're saving up $50,000 a year, or a good amount of money, but not millions upon millions of dollars. So the skills that are needed there, in my opinion, some of the most important skills are getting that bit of capital, which again, not a big deal, but it's something that you have to do. Then you have to be able to do light renovations, rent-ready renovations. If you're following this slow and steady, buy, a multifamily every couple of years type of thing, you probably don't want to be doing gut renovations. You probably want to be doing stuff that's minor reno that anybody could really do. So you do need to have, some construction skills. You need to have some management skills. But if I'm saying what's the most important thing with small multifamily like this, I'm going to rank property management actually at the top. And when we talk about buy and hold, probably the most important thing with buy and hold on small multifamily is the holding part. So I'm going to speak specifically to Greater Boston, but this is true in a lot of parts of the country. In order to cash flow on small multifamily or single families or 2 families or smaller units, you're typically going to have to go into areas that are a little bit tougher to manage. You're typically not going to be able to buy cash flow small multifamily assets in super, super high-end areas. Almost never is that going to be the case because there's always going to be somebody in that A class area that's going to want to buy in one unit and rent out the other couple. So to me, if we're talking about skill sets necessary in order to do really well, to become a multimillionaire passively in that area, it's important to be able to manage them. Now, again, we're talking about small multifamily and going at kind of a moderate pace, owning 6 multifamilies over the course of 10 years. Now, if you want to go a little bit faster, and this goes back to kind of your 10-year goal, you've got to add additional skills. The bigger and better, hold on, I shouldn't say better. Bigger isn't always better. But if you want to go bigger, you have to add additional skill sets in. So if you're going to go slow, you need a little bit of money, a little bit of renovation skill, some solid management in place. You might even be able to manage it yourself, and you're refinancing and you're going. But if you want to get to like 200 units over a 10-year period, now you have to go faster. Now you likely can't just use your capital. Now you likely need to raise capital from other people, which means you're adding an additional skill set of raising capital. Okay? I know you're all busy real estate agents. So I say this with the caveat of you may want to take the slow and steady route. But if you want to accelerate more, now you need to raise capital. And you also probably need to use a little bit more construction. Because if you're buying originally at a discount, kind of like you're fixing something, so let's say you're targeting 3 families, area where you can cash flow, and you're buying them at a discount, you're using someone else's money, you're renovating them, you can probably refinance every 6 to 8 months utilizing that strategy, okay? So if you want to be a little bit more aggressive on smaller multifamily, you need to learn how to raise capital and do a little bit heavier construction, okay? Now let's talk about like the pros and cons of small multifamily. We sold off all of our small multifamily. The reason that we did it is because of the degree of difficulty of management of the tenants, the older buildings that you need, and ultimately they weren't assets. When we thought about like what's our 10-year vision, right? I just turned 4 years old in July. What's the most important thing at this point for my life, for my partner's life? And it's really legacy and leaving assets to our kids. I've got 4 kids. He has 2 kids. And leaving legacy. And so for me, I looked at all of the challenges of owning these small multifamilies. And by the way, I'm not saying that owning these small multifamilies is the wrong thing for you. I'm just telling you some of the problems that we had with owning these smaller multifamilies. So in order to cash flow in these smaller multifamilies, one of the biggest problems we had, again, like I kind of mentioned, is that you've got to typically buy these assets in communities that are harder to manage. So it's hard to buy assets in an A-plus community that cash flow on multifamily assets. So the second thing that we had a problem with the smaller multifamily deals is just simply the fact that the buildings that we were buying were 100 years old. So what do 100-year-old buildings mean? 100-year-old buildings mean that you're going to have a lot of deferred maintenance. You're going to have a lot of times where you renovate a property and 7 or 8 years later, it needs to be renovated again. And so when I read the book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, again, this goes back to what would you tell yourself? What would I tell the 21-year-old self that read the book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, had a vision in my mind, but didn't execute it as well as I could have? What I would have said was that what attracted you to that book and what got you excited about that book is the passive part. Okay, I like to work, but the goal is to be passive. And this is my opinion. It is hard to be completely passive with small multifamily, with 1 unit to 6 unit multifamily, because you're buying them in tougher areas. The tenants are harder. There's more problems. There's more buildings because there's smaller units. So think about every time there's a snowstorm, there's a roof going every, year or two. Like there's always stuff going with them. So when we talk about passive, I look at those assets as kind of being in between having a job and being passive. They're kind of passive, but they're not passive enough, in my opinion, which is why a few years ago we transitioned into building apartments. And so we've got about 250 units that we're building right now, new construction. I'm going to tell you the pros and cons of those. One of the biggest cons of those, and this is something that, again, it's like, what skill sets do you need to be successful in the investing strategy? And what do you want your actual day to day to look like? So, in order to be successful in the apartment business, you need to become a capital raiser. There's no way around it. Every apartment building that we do requires $4 to $6 million of private capital to do the project. Now, we started by doing the first one on our own. Said, okay, we're going to use our own capital. But just like everybody else, there's only so many $4 to $5 million blocks that you can invest, right? And when I started in day one in real estate, I had zero of those blocks. I had none. I had no ability to do apartments when I started. But regardless of how much capital you have, the apartment space, and I'm going to tell you about a lot of benefits about it, but you've got to become a capital raiser, which means that you've got to spend a lot of time getting in front of people, showing them that you're credible, showing them that you know what you're talking about, and putting together a win-win situation so that if somebody wants to invest passively with you, that it doesn't just make sense for the operator, but it makes sense for the passive capital partner, okay? And I talked about that, earlier in the show, where I had somebody who retired with, a good chunk of money and lives passively off of the interest that they earn on our buildings. And I've got a couple other, really great stories. My best friend, the best man at my wedding, he worked for a startup company. He got some stock options, and he ended up getting a few $1,000,000 when the company sold. And now he's invested with our company, and he hasn't worked, which I find crazy because he stopped working at 35. But again, it's what your vision for your life is. And he was very fortunate to get those stock options. But getting back to like what you all need to do if you want to get into apartments, if you want the benefit of apartments, you've got to learn the capital raising skill. Now I'm going to talk quickly about some of the pros of apartments. And there are a lot of pros, which is why even though capital raising may not necessarily be something that I said I wanted to be when I grew up, right? It's something that I do because of the benefit that you get from apartments. So here are the benefits of apartments, and I think that they're huge. And this is why, whether you're thinking about actively getting into apartments or passively getting into apartments, why I'm so bullish on them. The first thing is, as opposed to the 3 to 6 unit small multifamily, apartment buildings are bigger, right? So, the latest project that we just raised capital for, an 88 unit in Nashua, New Hampshire, if one tenant moves out, we're good. We're real good. Like you have a single family or a two family and the tenant moves out, you've got like 50 to 100% vacancy. So when you have 88 units, and of course we're in an environment right now where there's very little vacancy rate, the vacancy rate's very low. But if you have 1 or 2 or 3 people move out of an 88 unit building, you're still in great shape. The second thing that I really love about apartment buildings is the fact that you can get new assets. So we're building new assets, as opposed to, again, most rental properties across the entire United States, most of them are going to be older assets. Now, if you're in New England, that means 100, 120 years old. But even if you're in other parts of the country, they're still older assets, okay? Then the other thing I love about apartments is you can buy them and you can still cash flow in nice areas, right? So we're in, B to A areas, B to A type of communities, where there are good jobs, where people have good credit, where there are high quality tenants. And again, thinking back to like, what's our vision? We want to be passive. Well, if you want to be passive, then you can't have tenants that are going to make your life active. You need passive tenants. You need people that are going to pay you through direct deposit. You need people that, if they have a small problem, maybe they fix it themselves, or they follow the protocol that you tell them that they need to follow, right? So those are like, to me, some of the big benefits of apartments. But again, it goes back to, well, if there are so many benefits of apartments, then what are the negatives? And again, the negative is, as opposed to, if you're talking about, we talked about quick turn deals in the beginning. If you're talking about assigning or flipping a deal, if you're assigning a deal, you need no money, zero. Again, this is why, like, you can do deals with no money. You really can. Or if you're in the inner circle, you can partner on a flip with us. Okay. Again, quick turn deals you can do with no money, right? You can make 40, 50, 60, $100,000 hits at a time and have no money. We talked about smaller multifamily. And we talked about the fact that you could BRRRR. You could use your FHA loan. You could use little money and raise just a little bit, or save money. And that's how, like I said, most millionaires who own rental real estate own these smaller assets. They own these smaller assets. But again, the problem with these smaller assets, even though you can do them with less money, is that they're more active, right? And, a couple years ago, somebody was talking to me about buying a building that a CVS was going into. And they told me the cap rate was like 2.5%. And I remember thinking, why would anybody ever buy an asset with a 2.5% cap rate? And now that I'm getting a little older, I'm not that old, but I'm getting older, I realized, if you have CVS as a client, how many calls are you ever going to get? Are you worried about CVS paying their bills? Are you worried about CVS keeping the parking lot clean? You're not. That's the ultimate passive investment. Now, we're not there yet. In order to get into a deal like that, that's a total capital play. That's somebody that maybe has a net worth of 20, 30, $40 million, and they say, hey, I don't need a very high rate of return for me to have enough passive income to live, right? But we're at the point now where we're doing apartments. And again, if you want to do apartments, you've got to either raise capital, right, to put into your deal, or be a passive investor in somebody else's deal, like our deals. And either way that you do it is a great way. The good thing about being a passive investor in an apartment deal is the fact that you pick a good operator, you put the money in, you sit back, and you collect a very high rate of return. A rate of return that, I wouldn't be super confident that I get in the stock market right now, with all the volatility. And even in the best case scenario, you're looking at the stock market thinking, okay, if I can get a 12% rate of return in the stock market, I'm going to be happy. So the last, investing strategy that I want to talk about really quickly, that's really popular right now, and I've got a strong opinion on it, and a lot of times I put my foot in my mouth a little bit with some of my opinions, but I'm always going to give them, because I just want to give, my, I want to help everyone as much as I can, and I'm always going to have my own opinions, and I'm just going to share them, period. So I don't love short-term rentals. I really don't. I look at what I want to do, and this, I guess I'm talking about myself, right? I'm talking about myself. I'm not talking about anybody who's on this call. So I will talk about the pros of short-term rentals too, but I look at myself and I go, short-term rentals mean that you've got to have a new person in there every week, which means that you have to have a mechanism to talk to a new person every week, a mechanism to market to a new person every week. You have to clean the place every single week. And most people who run short-term rentals essentially say it's like you're in the hospitality business. You're not necessarily like in the real estate investing business per se, even though you are investing in real estate. So I look at short-term rentals. There's three things I really don't like about them. And then I'm going to talk about the pros in them. The three things I don't like about them. Number one is they, by definition, have to be more active. Now, some people will say, well, I've got a good system set up. I don't have a lot of problems, but you still have things to do on a day-to-day basis, which makes it different than a long-term rental. So that's what I don't like. Number two, I'm really nervous about regulation of them. And I have been in different cities across the United States that I visited where somebody has said to me, oh, they banned short-term rentals here. Now, when I talk to people who manage short-term rentals, and I'm not an expert in short-term rentals, I'm just putting it out there because this is a strategy that some people are taking. But when I talk to people who are into short-term rentals, they feel like they have certain locations that are less likely to be a risk, and I'm sure that's probably true. When I look at things, I look at them long term. And I look and I say, no matter where you own a short term rental, could regulation come in that makes it an issue? And it's hard to say that the answer to that question is no. It almost has to be that it could be an issue. And I really, really, really don't like that. The third thing I don't like about short term rentals, and I just thought of a fourth thing, so I'm going to give you four things. The third thing I don't like about short term rentals is the asset price appreciation that's happened in them. So when people have always done short term rentals, but when they became really popular, asset prices were a lot lower. And if you look at different parts, areas throughout the country where short term rentals are popular, you see in some areas where they've tripled in price, they've quadrupled in price, which means that they have to be short-term rentals in order to carry them. And I don't love the fact that, again, regulation could come in, cause a problem, and then if you don't get the huge short-term rental income, you're in trouble. So all of those mechanisms, all of those things are things that I don't necessarily love. And the fourth thing that I don't love is the economy. And, people will say to me who run short-term rentals, and by the way, if you haven't already registered for our November event, we're actually going to have a panel. And this is going to be related to this topic, so I might as well bring it up right now. If you haven't registered for our November 3rd, November 4th event, we're expecting between 300 and 500 people there. It's going to be at the DoubleTree Hotel in Danvers. You can go to www.agentinvestorevent.com and register for free today. Again, that's www.agentinvestorevent.com. But we're going to do a panel that has a couple of people with each one of these investing strategies. So we have a couple people we're going to be on there that do short-term rentals. So what I'm saying now is going to be counterbalanced by a couple people. And if you're interested in short-term rentals, I would really strongly consider registering for the event today. The reason being is because if you're a listener of mine, you're probably not going to ever hear me say too many good things about short-term rentals, but don't let me stop you. Listen to some other people, get some other insight. So again, www.agentinvestorevent.com. But the fourth thing I don't like about short-term rentals is the economy. And people who love short-term rentals will say, well, everybody always vacations. I don't know if I agree with that. I don't know if I agree. I think that vacations are things that people cut back on when they lose their job. So, people aren't going to cut back on eating. They're not going to cut back on their rent or their house. They're probably not going to cut back on their daily Starbucks or Dunkin' Donuts coffee. Would they maybe not go on a vacation to Florida or Cape Cod or wherever you go? It makes me very nervous. And the supply that's been brought onto the market in the last few years has been overwhelming. More people are doing short-term rentals than ever. So I just knock them, not because I am anti anything. It's just my opinion. I am going to give you guys some anecdotal things about what other people have told me. I do have some very close friends and family that own short-term rentals. And from what I've been told, this is what the counterbalance to this will be. They're not as hard to manage as you think. I've got a good cleaning person, a good system in place, a good manager in place. The counterbalance will be, well, look how much it appreciated already. The counterbalance will be, well, now I don't have to have a vacation home because I use this a couple weeks out of the year or 3 weeks out of the year. So I'm saving money there. The counterbalance will be, yes, there could be regulation, but go in the areas where regulation is less likely. The counterbalance will be, well, these are still great houses in great areas. Even if short-term rentals got taken away, they'd still be worth a lot because they're on the water or they're in this high-end area. So those are the counterbalance points. But if you haven't registered yet for the November 3rd, November 4th event at the DoubleTree Hotel in Danvers, get on that right now. I will say that we are getting close to running out of room. And although I would say that as a sales pitch anyways, the truth of the matter is at some point soon, I am going to have to limit the registrations because the hotel can only fit 500 people. We can flex up to 500 people. But at some point we are going to get there. So I do know that we're going to get there well before November 3rd, November 4th. We're getting new people registering every single day, a few new people at least registering every single day, and we've got a ton of people already registered. So if you haven't registered yet, go to www.agentinvestorevent.com. And don't forget, if you bring a guest, every guest you bring, you get entered into a raffle for a free 2-day all-inclusive trip to Aruba. So I want to pause for a second because we're getting towards the end of the session. And I just want to see if there are any questions. There may not be. I know we covered a lot today. And I ask that you throw any questions that you have into the comment section. This is a lot to consider. Where you're going, what you want to do, what you want to accomplish, how you're going to get there. It's a lot. And, I talked earlier about like all the mistakes I've made. But the mistakes, they were made truthfully because this is a journey. It's not a straight arrow destination. And just because you may not be 1,000% confident about the vehicle necessary in order to get there, doesn't mean you shouldn't start. If you're on the sideline, if you haven't started yet, the biggest thing you can do is start, whether it's doing an assignment deal or a flip or a short-term rental or a buy and hold. You really need to get in the game. You really do. And what we find, like anything else, like you can read a manual on how to ride a bike, over and over again as a kid. It's not until you fall a couple times that you really learn how to ride a bike. And everybody rides a bike a little differently. Like the style with which I ride a bike is a little different than the next person. Same thing with driving a car. And it's all scary until you start. And I'm not going to lie and say it's not scary. Those of you who know my story know that it took me 6 years to do my first investing deal. I read Rich Dad Poor Dad in 2003, and I didn't do my first deal until 2009. Why didn't I do my first deal until 2009? I didn't have a mentor. I read all the books in the world. I listened to all the podcasts. I watched all the videos. I went to all the seminars. But it wasn't until I was able to actually have a conversation with anybody that I actually did any deals. And that's why I would encourage all of you, if you're interested in learning more about having me mentor you, type Inner Circle into the comment section below, and I will reach out to you directly, and we can talk and figure out like if I might be the right mentor for you. I'm not going to be the right mentor for everybody. I mean, if you want to do short-term rentals and that's all you're wanting to do, I'm not your guy, but I'm going to push you in the direction where I can help you. So the Inner Circle, just so you guys know, there's 2 free ways to get into the Inner Circle and 1 paid way. But regardless of like whether or not the Inner Circle is a fit for you, I would encourage you just to write Inner Circle below in the comment section so that we can at least have a 10-minute conversation. Because truthfully, And anybody who has gotten on one of these calls with me will tell you. And what I'm about to say might be a little bit arrogant, but it's the truth. I'm going to leave you in a better place than when you started the call. I guarantee. I guarantee if you do a 10, 15-minute call with me, you're going to have more clarity than when you started the call. And at the end of the day, that's all a mentor can do for you, right? They're going to use their experiences that they've had, their successes, their failures. They're going to ask you what your goals are and how can we apply the mentor's successes and failures to your life to help you reach your goals. So again, all that you need to do is put Inner Circle into the comment section below, and I will reach out to you on Facebook Messenger. No call originally, just Facebook Messenger, ask you a couple of questions. Where are you at? What are your goals? And maybe I can help you, maybe I can't, but I can at least help you in the first 10 or 15 minutes and at least push you in the right direction. So I do have another thing that I'm going to be doing, not tomorrow, but the Wednesday after, that I haven't done before, which is that I'm going to do a webinar. It's not going to be in the group. I'm going to do a webinar on one of our apartment deals, the 88 unit in Nashua. And I'm going to walk through the acquisition of the building, how we found it, how we funded it, the actual numbers, why we picked that deal, the construction that we're doing to it, what we paid for it, how much the construction is costing, how long the construction is going to take, what the valuation is going to be when it's done, what the rents are going to be when it's done. So I did do like an apartment training a couple of weeks ago, but I didn't get into the nitty gritty, and I felt like that's something that I missed. And I knew that would take me at least an hour to 90 minutes. So I'm going to do a separate presentation on that. If you want to learn more about that webinar, type webinar in the comment section below, and then I'll shoot you the link to register for that webinar. It's going to be Wednesday, October 5th. I think it's at 1 o'clock. Wednesday, October 5th at 12 o'clock. Just type webinar into the comment section below. And I will be releasing the topic for next week very soon. All right, guys, I appreciate you, as always, being faithful and loyal listeners, and I hope this session, brought a lot of value to you.
Thanks again for listening to the Agent Investor Podcast, and especially thank you for sharing the show with other agents and reviewing the show on iTunes. Every time you share the show and leave a review, you are potentially changing someone's life. To get free weekly education, strategies, and to connect with other agent investors across the country, join our free Facebook group at agentinvestor.com. Again, that's agentinvestor.com.